Hi, everyone, and welcome to Dead to Rights, the podcast. I'm your host, Donna Carrick. I've been missing in action for a little while. I took a bit of a break, as you may have noticed, but I'm back on the trail again and bringing you a terrific interview today. But before we get to it, I want to wish everyone in my home city of Toronto a very happy Pride weekend. The Pride history in Toronto is a really vast and diverse one. It began out of the 1981 riots that were caused by the bathhouse raids, and hundreds of people that grew into thousands marched in the streets looking for rights for the LGBT community. And it has a long history. It's now in its, I believe, 39th year with the Gay Pride Week parade, culminating this weekend, in fact. And it's just a wonderful thing. People have fought hard for their rights and for the general respect that they deserve. So kudos to everybody who's there. I wish I was there with you. I'm actually out of town this weekend, but I'm there with you in spirit, flying the colors. Today we're bringing you an interview with Jim Bottomley, and Jim is the author of a thriller titled Hypnotizing Lyons, which was a finalist for the Arthur Ellis Unpublished Unhanged Arthur Award this year. And Jim was out at the Arthur Ellis Awards. He came in from British Columbia, from Vancouver Island, for the awards ceremony, and I was very pleased to see him there. We got to chatting, and Jim indicated that he would be willing to come on the program with me, so I'm thrilled to bring him to you. His book is a real rollick, so I'm really looking forward to it coming out. I'll let you know. I'll keep you posted when it is available for sale. It's not yet available for sale, but once it is, I'll definitely let you know. So, without further ado, here is Jim Bottomley from Vancouver Island, author of Hypnotizing Lyons.
Let it rot.
Good morning, Jim, and welcome to Dead to Rights. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, Donna, and it's a pleasure to be on your show, and I'm a big fan, so
it's great. It's great to have you, and thanks for getting up so early on the West Coast. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about your manuscript called Hypnotizing Lyons, which was a finalist for the Arthur Ellis Unhanged Arthur Awards, which, for anyone who's not familiar, means that the unpublished manuscript was a finalist for Best Unpublished Manuscript Award. And you were telling me a little bit about your mentor, Kathy Astolfo, too, in the CWC mentorship program, and how she helped you along with the manuscript. When did you begin writing it? Because I know you've had quite a career as a consultant and a speaker. And what made you turn to crime writing?
Well, in fact, I kind of went at it the other way around and a long time ago, in the sense that, yes, I'm a professional speaker, and I've been an entrepreneur and a consultant and so on, but it was kind of like, the jobs I had to do because the writing wouldn't work. So I started trying to be the writer. I, in fact, had a high-powered job for Quaker Oats for Puss in Boots and special menu in new product development, so launching new products to the grocery trade. Mm-hmm. And I'd always wanted to be a writer. I always thought of being a writer. I can remember looking at books and thinking, wow, it'd be great to, actually have a physical book out there that I wrote. And I used to make movies with my friends on Super 8 film, and always thought of movies or writing novels. And so I took English at university at Western, and I was a little disillusioned because it wasn't so much in those days creative writing. It was more, to be a critic and to kind of analyze fiction. I wanted to actually write it. And I thought, when I was younger, I had this high-powered job and it was going well. And I thought, if I don't try when I'm young, maybe I'll never try. So I actually quit my job to be a writer. A lot of people thought I was crazy. And in retrospect, maybe I was. Because I entered the Seal first novel contest. Janet Turnbull used to run it, Seal Books. And she called me down to Toronto. We had a meeting. She really liked the premise of the story. She thought it was great, but I was a rookie writer and I needed to learn the craft better. And so she advised me to keep at it. Through the Writer in Residence program, that's been really, really helpful for me over time. Paul Corrington and I got together through that. He saw the screenplay version because I've alternated between the screenplay and the novel for this and really liked it. And then through him, he connected me with some Hollywood agents. So ICM, I have the review from them. But from the screenplay, they said it was too complex with two main characters, but they loved the premise, loved the idea. So the idea when I pitch it is think of a prison breakout story, but from a maximum security psychiatric hospital prison. It's the patients are breaking out. And in fact, the main character is a truck driver that had a horrendous accident. He wakes up in a burning fire in his front lawn. Turns out he's missing 44 days of memory and he's charged with a murder he can't remember. So he's sent to a psychiatric hospital for hypnotherapy to try to recover the memories. And this is, I've worked in actually in this kind of a place, which helped inspire me. That was my summer job through university. And in those kind of places, it's like a lion pride. The patients have rankings. He certainly disrupts the pride rankings, and that's where it comes, the title comes, Hypnotizing Lyons. There's a woman psychiatrist, Cecily Williams, Dr. Cecily Williams, and she does hypnotherapy on Dan Harkness, the main character, and what's revealed is a twisted conspiracy that actually may mean that he'll have to break out to prove his innocence.
Wow, that sounds like a really fantastic story, actually, Jim. I really do like that. And I love complex stories, by the way. The more complex, the better. One of the themes that I've always wanted to really explore, especially as a woman writer, because this is an arena where men really do excel, and that is being able to get into almost chaos theory with crime writing, where you don't really know what's going to happen next. You step out the door with a plan, but a truck hits the person standing beside you. And from there, the day just progresses with one unforeseen incident after another. And women aren't as, well, I'm going to take a lot of flack for saying this, but I don't think women are yet as good at this. And I think it's something I'd love to explore. I'd love to see more female writers explore that kind of thinking, because it takes you out of the order. You know, I don't like too much order in what I enjoy watching and reading. And, you know.
Well, if you look at popular culture now, and the example would be Game of Thrones, is that people, I think, have been through the less complex stuff and kind of understand story structure and are more able to predict where things are going. And I think they want a bit more madness and craziness, because the world become more mad and crazy.
That's right. And Game of Thrones is an excellent example. I just love it. You really cannot know what's going to happen next. And the other thing that I really, we've been watching a show right now, speaking of popular culture. We didn't see it when it first came out, but we've been binge watching it, and we're very near the final episode. It's called Boardwalk Empire. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
No, I haven't.
Well, I won't say too much about it, except to say that it perpetuates that kind of chaos thinking. But at the same time, it tries to tie to actual history. So it's constrained a little bit by history in the chaos. But you know, truth really is stranger than fiction quite often. So there's a lot of chaos in truth.
Well, in fact, in my novel, the antagonist is a sociopath that doesn't actually commit any violence. He's never done a violent act. He'd never touch you. But what he's a master of is creating delusion that generates violence that he can watch. So he's a delusion spinner. And so the novel plays on the psychiatric condition called folie à deux, which is sharing delusion. And this is the time for him. So I think, you know, despite the long path of getting this ready to go, I think it's probably the appropriate time for it actually to come out.
I do too, actually. I think it really is. And it's called Hypnotizing Lyons. Now, tell me a little bit about your progression through the publishing industry.
Well, as I mentioned, Paul Corrington was a real champion. It was so sad to see him go. He was a great writer as well, and certainly not in the kind of genre I'm talking about. In fact, a theme throughout this, you mentioned, you know, the adding the kind of madness and craziness. I've been told continually through time that I will likely not get this published in Canada because, you know, Canada doesn't do crazy thriller kind of novels like this. You know, it's not really the genre that we're rooted in. With that in mind, I've kind of, with the particularly the screenplay side, I rooted more into agents in the U.S. So as I mentioned, International Creative Management gave me a great review, and one of the best responses to any writing I had was, "You certainly can write," was one of their comments. So that was great. They mentioned it being too complex. So I thought, well, you know, if it's too complex for a screenplay, I want to, you know, continue the complexity with both main characters, and I'm going to write the novel that way. So I rewrote the novel, took time off to do that again, and this is, you know, where I was a full-time novelist, which is a tough gig to make money
sure
from.
is.
You know, park the peg on the sidewalk by reading and getting some money thrown in your hat. But, you know, I lived in Greece for a summer, and, you know, I had a lot of adventures. My wife and I went around the world at one point for a year, so it was quite exciting times. But coming out of that, I had a finished novel and went back to the agent, and ended up with Ken Sherman, the agent out of Hollywood, who specializes in books that might be good movies. And he actually had the coverage provided to me and said, here's what they said about my story, his story coverage people. And again, a lot of praise for it. In fact, one of the main characters, you know, the whole aspect of making cuts, he was thought to be a great coming of age story. It was kind of my proxy for being a young guy working in the psychiatric hospital. And now he's cut completely. So I've evolved to a much more, in fact, the review said one of the better coming of age stories we've seen, but that's all gone, you know, killing your darlings, right? So
yes, absolutely.
So, but what they advised, and who I worked with is Ken said, would you like to work with my editor, Aviva Leighton? So I said, sure, I'd be happy to work with anyone. And so for 2 years, I worked with Aviva, and she is actually Irving Leighton's wife, the Pope of Canada, and she lives in LA now, and was very helpful. And what she did is advise me to convert it from the third person to the first person. So it's a lot better now because it's the most unreliable narrator, a mental patient, you know. So it's kind of like the girl on the train, you know, she was unreliable because of drinking. This person may or may not be delusional. And so the book explores the question, do delusions destroy? And one of the heart of this thing is there could be even a paranormal component, and is it real or is it not? So in that essence, I converted to first person, but I was kind of naive about it and made mistakes. So, for example, you know, if I said he saw the cat, I converted to I see the cat. Well, you know, you don't need to say I see the cat. The cat's there. Just describe the cat. So I had problems with it. There was mistakes, is what Ken said, and so he said, no, more work has to be done on that. And so I then went back at it again, and have had help through the Cook Agency as well. They gave me a great review. That was after a pitch at Bloody Words in 2014. And there were still issues with it, and legitimate issues that I had to fix. And so, you know, I have no regrets of people turning me down. I always have looked at it that if I can make it better, any advice is great. And usually I don't get the just simple turn downs. I'll get like 6 pages of this is great, but here's the problem. So I've always been enthused by the fact
the quality rejections, Jim. The quality rejections, I call those.
So I've had a lot of quality rejections, Donna. So, you know, and in any case, what came out of that was, you know, I really have to concentrate on my craft and really learn this writing game better. And so I concentrated on trying to write short stories. And in fact, my wife and I lived in Jasper, Alberta for 11 years. And we moved to the west coast of Vancouver Island, where there's a really active writers collective here called the Souk Writers Collective. And they've been fabulous because, for example, when I was doing the final edits before submitting it to the Arthur Ellis Award contest, I had 5 different copies that I printed off with people's markings and changes. So literally every sentence I could go, well, geez, 4 people suggested this. This is a question about that. So really helped me round it out. And in the meantime, in the last 3 years, I've written several short stories. One was a finalist for Best BC Short Story in 2018 called Running with Salmon. And I've had 3 of them published. So I think I've kind of got over maybe the major hurdle of getting the craft down. and certainly feel a lot more comfortable as a writer moving forward to
Yeah.
pursue sequel and other things I'm working on.
You touched on two really important things there too, because a lot of the people who would listen are people who are just getting into the writing industry, and so I tend to try and harp a little bit on certain points. And one is the conversion to first person. Over the past decade, I would say there's been a real emergence of first person literature and genre, and it's been really good to see. I mean, I happen to love first person. I like both. But one caveat for listeners that first person is not always appropriate. And when it's not appropriate, you shouldn't employ it in manuscripts where it's really not appropriate. Be cautious of that, and don't just do it because it is a strong trend. It's got to actually work within the manuscript that you are developing. And when you do make a conversion to first person, you really have got to be the camera eye. You can't, as Jim was saying, be overly explanatory of everything you see and hear. It just has to happen around you as the camera eye. Because the whole point of first person is to keep it moving, really.
Yeah, and the complication for me, Donna, was that I've been converting between screenplays and novels, which are two different things. So, I would have a scene where he's sitting on the grass when the novel opens and there's a fire in front of him, and it turns out it's his house on fire and he's just waking up. Well, when I wrote it in the first person, I had, this whole kind of, it's like a camera with him sitting on the lawn. It wasn't the right point of view, right? You had to get the point of view directly from him, where he's looking down at his legs and he's seeing he's sitting cross-legged, and why am I sitting cross-legged on my lawn, and my pants are wet. You have to root to the first person outlook, which is
exactly, you have to be the protagonist, and if you can't be the protagonist, first person is not for you. And not only that, if you cannot cover enough of the action through the first person eye, then you have to default back to the omnipresent third person, because otherwise you're robbing your readers.
Well, it was a very difficult thing for me because it is a very complex plot with lots going on. And of course, if it's in the first person, only that person could be in the room at any time when things are happening. So
that's right.
To get the plot points out in things that may be, off camera for the main character, well, then how do you cover those? And so, yeah, it was a real challenge trying to do that conversion. I don't think at the first I did it well, but certainly, that's part of learning. You have to take your knocks and move forward and try to make it better. So.
Which is exactly the second point you touched on that I wanted to drive home for listeners, which is that this is it's an art and it's a craft and it's also a business, and you've got to be the best you can at it. And that means taking some rejection, taking some notes, developing your work. And,
definitely. Yeah. And, I've always looked at it that any feedback is to make this novel better. It's not about my ego. That's not what you got to think about. It's about making this work better, and how can we make this particular piece of art better, right? So
exactly.
One of the big lessons I had, Donna, was more in the last 3 years, and this is one, I kind of knocked myself for. I figured I'm a pretty smart guy, but how did I miss this and not really get it? But when one of the readers here in the Suit Collective, Angela Dorsey, who's a great novelist as well, published many. She was reading some of my submission, and she took a passage where in the novel, I'll tell you a little bit about the main character to set it up. The protagonist is a Canadian hockey player who moved to the U.S. On a hockey scholarship, and he's married an American woman who's an investigative journalist. They met at that college. And so he, when he's sent to the psychiatric facility for hypnotherapy, and he's charged with the murder of his wife, who he loves dearly, he tells a lot of stories about his wife. Obviously, his focus is he figures he's innocent. He's got to figure out, is she really died? Because there's a body burned in this fire beyond recognition, but they haven't yet been able to determine through DNA who it is. So he's hoping it isn't his wife. And so that's one of the intrigues in terms of getting hypnotized. But he's a hockey player, and he's also and he uses his goon skills, by the way, from hockey, and I'm a hockey player as well, to survive in the mental hospital. but he's also a songwriter. So that's his profession. He's trying to be a songwriter. He ends up as a truck driver because the songwriting didn't work. And I write songs as well. I'm a lyricist. So many different musicians, I've worked on writing songs. I play harmonica, and I really enjoy that aspect of writing as well. And so this is a fellow that writes songs when he's really stressed. So when he's sent to the solitary, he's writing a song of who could have it worse than me, and he writes a song called Colorblind, which is about someone that's in a war that would have it worse than him. But there's 10 songs in the novel, and we, my band, the Well-Spaced Trees, we've created demos of them, and hopefully we'll launch an album at some point of the songs from the novel, which is kind of intriguing. But in any case, at one point in the novel, he talks about his wife, and he says, in the past, I'd go camping, take a woman camping, and I'd pull out my guitar around the fire and sing one of my original songs. I'd use her name in it, and it would always go really well, in terms of romance. And so I took my wife, Gwen, who became my wife later, on one of our initial dates, and we went camping, and I took out my guitar, and nothing better than playing, music with and singing with my wife, Gwen. Well, Angela said to me, geez, that's really lame, Jim. What do you mean it's lame? Well, that's not, you could sing with anyone around the fire. Why this specific woman draws love from this guy around this singing thing? You got to anchor a story that, covers the emotion without the, kind of telling, you got to show and have it's always more interesting for the reader to figure these things out themselves. So how it now reads is, I pulled out my guitar and I sang for Gwen around the fire, and after the song was over, she said to me, Dan, that's a really great song, but, to me, I think it would be better if you wrote it with a 1-4-5 note pattern.
I love it.
Yeah, so, what a reader then determines is, well, obviously he loves her, they're writing songs together, she knows music, it also speaks to her character, right? So,
well, yeah, you've given her personality, you've given her intelligence, and you've given her humanity. And, it's just, I am so tired of females not having that in fiction, because in real life, we will challenge you,
Well, this isn't really the theme here, but as a professional speaker, I'm a futurist. So, after doing all this new product development, how do I make a living? The writing's not going. I started doing consulting work, and it ended up being strategic planning. I do my plans in a different way, and that's evolved into this speaking thing. And at this point, Don, I think I've spoken to 270,000 Canadians, if you add up all the dates over all the years and across every profession. Next week is the future of blueberry. So there's 20 countries involved, and I'm off to Vancouver to spend 3 days planning the future of blueberry production. So
wow.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. But in all cases, with the future, if someone asked me, is there one strategy we could do to make this world better? And I'm very solid with this one, and very strong on it. If we could only pick one thing to make the world better, that's international empowerment of women. By far,
yes.
the most important thing.
Yes.
So I'm with the Sisters in Crime. I'm with Crime Righting Women, and I think the future will be more. In fact, that's reflected in the novel. So the psychiatrist in the novel is a Black woman, and she's trying to keep the lid on all this delusion that the antagonist is creating in the ward. He latches on to Dan's hypnosis sessions, the story that comes out of that, which is maybe paranormal. And he promotes a great delusion that the other patients become inspired by. The psychiatrist sees that this is a major problem. And in fact, this particular patient, the sociopath, has spun delusions that have caused the loss of life in the past. So she wants to kind of squelch it and try to keep it at bay. And so in her office, all of her themes is elephants. She volunteers in Africa in elephant rehab, and she's a real believer in elephant society because it's more matriarch society. It's run by wise females, as opposed to the patients, which have this lion pride thing, and so they're all about lions. And lions will sniff the pee on the border of the other male lion and determine, geez, I think that's sick enough that we can go in and take them out, and we may even eat the babies of the other lion. And this kind of male testosterone-driven world that we've been living in, right? So
And
it kind of sets up
somewhere in the middle, somewhere in the middle of all that, is harmony somewhere. And
Mhm.
being a musician yourself, I mean, it's all about harmony. It's not
Oh,
about, demonizing one personality type over another. It's just
mm,
about finding the harmonic balance between the two.
definitely, definitely. And it's an interesting thing because if we look at who have we fought over time, we've only had four economies in the history of the world: hunter-gatherers, and then it's always technology that changed things. That's why so much changes in the air, because technology is morphing us into a new economy with all the new the things coming out. So in the hunter-gatherer days, we fought the other tribes. Then we invented tools that till the soil. We ended up in city-states, and of course, we fought the other city-states. Then we invented machines driven by energy that ended up in the industrial age, and we colonized and created nations artificially by cutting across tribal borders and created nations. So we fought the other nations. So if you look at the history of Earth, we've gone from fighting the tribe to fighting the city to fighting the nation. What's next?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
spent a lot of time thinking about that. And really, what should be next is no fighting, harmony, as you say.
It should be, yeah.
How do we get to that? Well, what we have to do is we have to recognize we're all in this together. Certainly from traveling around the world, and I've traveled fairly extensively in my job as well. People around the world are more the same than different. We're all connected. We all should be more harmonious. There's a lot of delusion that spins off violence and problems, and that's being stoked as we speak. But in essence, what do we need to happen? We have to recognize that all people should be respected,
Mm-hmm.
irrespective of their gender, of their race, or of their religion, and that we
Mm-hmm.
have to come up with universal code for human values, human rights, for trade, and for the environment. And that's where
Yeah.
we're headed. That's where the United Nations and globalization was headed. And whenever you have a major social trend going one way, you always have a heavy resistance going the other way. And that's the era we're in right now.
Yes, yes,
I,
exactly. And it's either
I,
going to get worse or it's going to get better.
yeah.
And what you're talking about, we almost need like a societal braille, something that we all understand. Um,
Well, in fact, this novel, by the way, it's definitely a psychological thriller, and it's a page turner. I've gone with the James Patterson, kind of average of 5 pages per chapter with a hook at each to try to put
mhm.
people through it in this age of short attention spans. And so it's really I think a kind of a rousing story and a great beach read kind of thing. But in essence, it's a debate on the future of human morality. That's really
Mhm.
what it's from the futurist.
Well, I
So,
can't wait till it comes out because I'm going to be one of your first readers, definitely. And the other thing too, Jim, when your demo comes out, I'd love to hear it.
yes, well,
Our son is a musician. He's in third year at York right now, and he's playing with the Toronto All Star Big Band, and that's what he's doing this week. And he's got a couple of gigs this week, and they've got like multiple gigs every week. So he's just in heaven right now.
that's
So
awesome.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I don't think I myself as a great musician, but I do really well. I have a knack for matching lyrics to music. So
yeah, yeah.
every musician I work with, and I've worked with a lot, will have little ditties that they've created, and I'll sit with them and play with them. What's that feel? What inspired you? What emotion came from you? And I can kind of go away and poof, I get a song comes out. So
Yeah, yeah,
I really enjoy that whole aspect. That's a lot of fun for me, and
yeah.
certainly
Well, he
creativity.
loves
Writing is
scoring. He loves composing and scoring. That's his ultimate goal, his drive. And he's done some scoring for some fellow students who are in film, and he's loved doing that. That's what his real ultimate drive is, more so than just being a musician. So, but
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
You must be real pleasurable to go watch him, listen to him play.
It really is. It's a lot of fun. And the other thing that's been really terrific is that we've always had a house full of music. So that's been
Mm.
really great. Our
Yeah, yeah.
daughter studies drums. So so we've always got something going on now.
Oh, that's
She's not a
great.
performer though. She loves to take her drums and play them when nobody's around, like that sort
So
of thing.
Are you into music as well? Do you play an instrument, Donna, then? Is that what inspired the...
Oh, God, no. I would have loved to. I think I'm a frustrated musician. I remember as a kid begging my parents to put me into piano lessons, and all the girls studied piano. But we were Air Force, and my mother's argument was, we're always moving. We're always moving. We can't do that. So, yeah, I think there's a frustrated element there. Now, in 2009, when I came out with my book, The First Excellence, which featured a young Chinese Canadian adoptee. She played the clarinet. So I studied clarinet for a couple of years just to try and get a feel for the instrument, because it's not something you can fake. Even the picking it up, the cleaning of it, the putting it together, the sound that it produces is so spiritual. You can't fake it. You have to have some hands-on with it, Mm-hmm. But no, I've never actually gotten to a point where I could even say I'm a pretend musician. No.
Well, I had actually taken music when I was in high school and started out on trumpet, and then switched to the French horn because that was the way to get me in the senior band. And we had an exchange with Germany, so we went and lived with German families in Moscow, Germany, and I had to be good enough in the band to actually make the band so I could get that trip in. But that was not necessarily my calling, the French horn, I don't think so. But it was a lot of fun having the trip, and that really inspired me for other travel. So I'm a big fan.
The arts are a melting pot. I think of the arts as a melting pot. I mean, there's, especially as a writer, because you can grab from any of the artistic elements, whether it's dance or painting. I've had a character that was a painter, and my husband and I we love Canadian art. We're really passionate about it. Every winter we used to go from show to show and from showroom to showroom in Toronto. And there's just a lot of great Canadian artists of every genre. And I find that when we go out and look at paintings, I am inspired to write. It's just funny the way that crossover between the arts works,
Well, the story I just had that was celebrated here in BC, the Running with Salmon, is a story that covers the salmon run here on the island. And actually with local arts groups, we're going to take up a combo of recruiting people with art that relate to salmon. And of course, this is ecosystem friendly in the sense that so many bears eat salmon. They help regenerate the rainforest, the leftover salmon that the bears take out of the rivers. And so we're going to try to create a book of both art and writings and poetry and so on that would be a celebration of the salmon and hopefully a fundraiser for salmon restoration. So that's a project that we're working on now here locally.
Wow, that's really something, yeah. Jim, thank you very much. But before I let you go, I have to ask you, is there one thing as a reader that you either love or hate, that you would either encourage new writers to project or would discourage them? I'm talking about either a pet peeve when you read, without naming any authors, because I'm not about bashing authors, or something that an author that you've read has done that you love, that really draws you to them. Some element of style,
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to make mine really lean and move forward. To me, I'm not as inclined to enjoy the overly descriptive works. I like to have something moving along that surprises me. If it's kind of a plot that I've seen before and it kind of sniffs of predictability, that's usually where I start to lose interest, particularly if it's heavily descriptive. Now, in other cases, sometimes the description, in certain poetry, and I'm working with different poets here and trying to learn that and how it combines and contrasts to being a lyricist. But I think that for me, I need a story. I need something that kind of wraps me around. I'm a storyteller as a speaker. I have a weird mind in that anyone tells me a story, I'll remember the story. I may forget your name. I may forget specifics, but I'll be able to say, hey, didn't you tell me this? And I'll tell you the story you told me. So that seems to me, I'm attracted to stories.
There's a huge gap between poetic writing and overly descriptive writing. They're not the same thing, and I think people make that mistake. I'm with you on that. If the writer's character walks into a room and has to describe every stitch in the Chantilly lace drapes, that's way over the pale for me. But there's poetic writing doesn't do that, I don't find. Like, my background always in writing was poetry as well, so I'm with you on that. There's something in the way when the writer sees in their head the scene
Hmm.
and can lay it out with something that touches you poetically, that
We've been
puts you
having
in the place.
we've been
That's
having
not the same as describing.
Oh, definitely. We've been having sessions with Wendy Morton, who's an Order of Canada poet here living in Souk. And, she's been really helpful in teaching me some of the difference between overly descriptive versus poetic description, and
Hmm.
a big part of it is never use a cliche. And, that's what she's
Exactly.
really big on. But, try to say it in a unique way that connects to a bigger picture or a different point or illustrates another idea. And, I think poetry brings a complexity that makes it interesting as well.
Yeah, and a poetic passage, just a phrase or a word even, can put the reader in the place and mindset of the writer without the need for great description.
Hmm. Yeah, I think
Whatever.
I love Bob Dylan as a lyricist, and so
Yes.
the little phrases he'll use to describe something, and it's never very clear. It's never completely linear. He always throws in we's and I's and you's into
Mm-hmm.
his lyrics because everything's kind of interconnected, and so
Yes.
I find it very fascinating to again. I don't know. You can learn all your life. In the future, we'll be learning a living, but there's always something to learn about this. That's part of the joy of being a writer, I think, right, Don?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you 100% on that. And I always have thought too, people who tell me that they will only write what they know.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, we're not there anymore. We're really not. Google takes away the excuse for that. I mean, we're all about learning. We're all about putting ourselves in different situations, learn it, research it, connect with it, and then express it to your reader,
Hmm.
what you have discovered.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that the world's open for you to attempt things, and that's what art is about.
Yep. Yep.
Trying to push the boundaries and try to connect. So, I don't think you should just be limited to your own world, or it could be kind of boring at times.
I
Although
would
I think
think.
my own life, I've made decisions that probably say, would this make a better story? Ooh, I'm going to go that route. Which maybe to my detriment, Donna.
I think you've had quite a varied life from what I'm hearing. It sounds like
Well,
it's would be something worth reading about.
Well, at one point, going across the states, I lived on the Ogallala Indian Reserve, Native Reserve, First Nations Reserve in the U.S. for 3 days, and I think I've learned the true story of Custer in that time. That would probably be seen as something that wasn't maybe the wisest move at times, given the history there, and certainly that was advised in some of the situations we were in. But it was, wonderful story.
Well, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you, Jim, and I hope you're going to stay in touch and let me know as you move through the publishing process with your book. And tell us again the title.
Hypnotizing Lyons.
Yes, yes. And where do your short stories appear, just so readers can find them?
Well, actually, it's Souk Writers Collective. We're just putting together the website. We printed our own books, and I'm in 3 of them at this point. And we're going to be putting them online and putting them out in a much more broader way. So over time, that will happen.
Whenever you have links that you want to share with me, please send them on over.
Do
I
that.
would love
Sure.
to see them. I would love to see the anthologies and let me know as your work progresses.
Oh,
Thanks.
great. And you'll probably hear me scream when I finally get a publishing contract right from the Vancouver Island.
Just so our listeners know, Jim's on the Vancouver Island and I'm in Toronto. So go ahead and Google the distance there.
Yeah.
I'll
That's
hear
how
you,
excited
Jim.
I'll be anyway, Donna.
Thank you very much. Stay with me on the line for a second. I'm just going to stop the recording. I want to thank Jim Bottomley for joining us today on Dead to Rights, the podcast. Jim, it was great talking to you and hearing your insights into the entire creative process. I can't wait for your book to come out and also for your demo. Our thanks go out to all the writers who make this program special for new writers and for readers. Also to Ted Carrick for providing the music for this program. If you're interested in joining me on Dead to Rights, please let me know. You can contact me anytime at carrickpublishing@rogers.com and simply say Dead to Rights interview in the subject line. Thank you very much for listening and have a great rest of the weekend.
A dusty road, a man alone. His vital signs go on hold. And I don't know what you've been told, but the years have turned my eyes gold. And I told you what you told me, we'd never be in the same boat for free. Yet it rides, let it rot.